When you think about it, some of the IDV stories have a deeper meaning than we give them credit for. When you really sit with them, they reflect not just the characters' lives, but sometimes a bit of our own too. Today, I kind of want to talk about a few of those stories. Lore pieces that I personally find meaningful, tragic, sad, and yet somehow beautiful. Of course, this is just my take, my bias, my perspective. So you're totally free to disagree. I just feel like these parts of the story deserve a little more love because there's something quietly beautiful about them that really stays with you once you notice it. Lichen is a skin for the little girl, released during the Halloween event of 2024. I haven't gone through the full story of that year's event yet, but there's one particular line that caught my attention. At first glance, it seems like it might connect to the main storyline, and even if it doesn't, what she said still feels really sad. In the event, Lichen mentioned that someone was crying when she left. She said that she couldn't comfort that person anymore, and so she hoped they would forget about her soon. Her reason? Because if that person didn't remember her, then they wouldn't feel sad anymore. When someone asked if she'd be sad about that, Lichen admitted that she would, but she tried to reassure herself that it would only be a little sad, because if that person forgot about her and wasn't sad anymore, then she wouldn't be sad either. Even though I haven't read the full Halloween event story, what Lichen said immediately reminded me of Alice from the main storyline. You see, Alice returned to the manor as an adult to uncover the truth behind the Elitist Manor tragedy. And if we look back at Ashes of Memory Part 2, we get a glimpse of Orpheus, promising Alice that they'd meet again someday. Now, I can't help but wonder if what Lichen said is meant to parallel that part of the story. Did Orpheus really cry when they were separated as children? Did Alice truly want him to forget her? We know that Orpheus spent his adult life drowning in regret, haunted by what happened at Elitist Manor. Everything he did afterward, from his experiments to the manor game itself, feels like a self-inflicted purgatory built from guilt and grief. Maybe Alice didn't want him to live like that. Maybe she just wanted him to be free, even if that meant forgetting her. Imagine being erased from the memory of someone you love, someone you still hold dear, just so they can stop hurting. It's painful, but it's also selfless, in a really bittersweet way. It actually reminds me of an old anime called Clannad. There was this one clumsy girl who loved being around her classmates, but over time, everyone started forgetting her, because in reality she wasn't really there. She was just a lingering memory of a girl who never got the chance to go to school after an accident left her in a coma. Sad, isn't it? You can see everyone, remember everything, but no one remembers you. It makes me think, what if the old Orpheus, the one we see in the prologue who lost his memory, didn't erase his memories himself? What if it was Alice? What if she erased herself from his mind, just so he could stop suffering? The mechanic, Tracy Reznik, might have grown up without a mother, but that doesn't mean her life was miserable. In fact, her story feels full of color and warmth, thanks to the person who raised her. Her father, Mark, a man who carried both the weight of loss and the light of love in his heart. When Tracy was born, her mother, Irene, passed away. It must have been a devastating blow for Mark, losing the woman he loved and being left to raise their newborn daughter alone. But despite his grief, he didn't give up. He poured everything he had into raising Tracy, becoming both a mother and a father to her. Mark worked as a watchmaker, and since there was no one else to care for Tracy, he often brought her to his workshop. Surrounded by gears, ticking clocks, and the gentle rhythm of time, Tracy grew up watching her father work, and somewhere along the way she fell in love with it too. She inherited his craft, his patience, and eventually even surpassed his skill. But what I really want to talk about isn't just Tracy's story, it's Mark's. Because when you think about it, Losing someone you love that deeply can break a person. It could have turned him bitter, withdrawn, or even cold toward his child. I've seen that kind of pain before. How grief can consume someone and make them lash out at those they love most. Mark had every reason to crumble under that weight, but instead, he chose to move forward. Even through sadness and despair, he kept giving Tracy everything he had. Care, patience, and warmth. And that, to me, is what makes him such a beautiful character. Mark also never forget about his wife. In his diary, he still mentioned her name, and according to Tracy's 6th letter, he often told customers about Irene and their daughter. I imagine he spoke of her fondly, painting her image with love and memory so that Tracy, who never got to meet her mother, could still feel close to her. There's one moment that always gets me. Tracy once made a small figure of a woman from the scraps in her father's shop. When Mark saw it, he grew silent, perhaps smiling, perhaps crying, because even though Tracy never knew Irene, she understood her father's love for her. I think, in a way, every bit of love Mark gave to Tracy was also his way of loving Irene. By raising Tracy with tenderness, he was keeping Irene's wish alive, ensuring that their daughter would grow up to be happy, kind, and loved. And the most touching part? Mark never remarried. He remained faithful to Irene, keeping her memory alive in both his heart and his daughter's smile. For him, Irene was irreplaceable, and Tracy's happiness was the only thing that mattered. Violetta is often considered one of the most beloved hunters in Identity 5, and that's not without reason. Her story is heartbreaking, and with the release of Hullabaloo in 2024, we got to see just how deeply written she really is. Personally, I'd say she might be one of the best written hunters in the entire game. But there's one particular moment I want to highlight. A line from her deduction quest. In it, Violetta says, "You can deny it all you want, but you are still my father." It's followed by an image of a young girl without limbs, gently resting in the arms of a man wearing a top hat. For context, that girl is Violetta, and the man is Max, the circus owner. For Violetta, Max was her entire world. Born without limbs, she was abandoned by her parents and left to die in a basket during a performance. That should have been the end for her, until Max found her. To others, Violetta was a strange, pitiful creature, something to be looked down on or hidden away. But Max saw something else, not out of kindness, but out of opportunity. To him, Violetta was a spectacle, someone who could become a star of the circus, or rather, his next source of profit. He took her in, not out of love, but ambition. Still, to Violetta, none of that mattered. Max gave her a place to belong, a reason to exist. He was the one who raised her, the one who gave her a home. So, in her heart, Max became her father, her world. Even when she grew older, and realized that Max only saw her as a tool, a cash cow, she still couldn't hate him. Instead, she tried harder and harder to prove her worth, hoping to stay as the main star, so she could keep his affection, and keep the only home she'd ever known. As tragic as it is, we know how it ends. Things didn't go the way she dreamed. After her shine faded, Max threw her out, discarded her the moment she stopped being valuable. After all, Max only saw Violetta as an asset, and once she was no longer profitable, she was gone. And I can't help but wonder, how did Violetta feel after that? Did she still love him, even after everything? Did she still think of the circus as her home? In Hullabaloo, we see her trying to rebuild that dream, to shine again, to become the star she once was, under Max's circus. It's tragic, really, because it shows how deeply that love and longing were rooted in her. It also makes me wonder, was Violetta's desire to be the star really about seeking attention, or was it something deeper? Maybe it came from her past, because for her, being the main star meant survival. It meant being loved, wanted, and having a place to belong. Sometimes, I think, if Max hadn't thrown her away, if he had just seen her as more than a performer, maybe their story wouldn't have ended so sadly. After all, for Violetta, Max wasn't just a man in a top hat. He was her father. And in a way, that's something a lot of us can understand. No matter how cruel or distant our parents might be, to a child, they're still the ones we love the most. But there's something else I've learned from Violetta's story. Not everyone is meant to be a parent. Violetta's real parents, instead of taking her to an orphanage or giving her a chance, simply left her to die. It's cruel beyond words, but sadly, it's something that still happens in real life, even where I live. When you decide to build a life with someone, to start a family, you can't just expect the sunshine and rainbows. You have to accept the rainstorms and thunder too. The same goes for having children. No baby wishes to be born limbless, deformed, or disabled, and no parent wishes for that either. But when it happens, it happens. A parent's duty is to raise their child, no matter the circumstances. And a child's duty, when they're grown, is to live their own life while staying grateful to those who raised them. Among all the characters in Identity 5, Kevin Ayuso's story has always stayed with me. His reason for coming to the manor is a little unclear at first, but if you read between the lines, it's not hard to feel that he came here carrying something heavy, a guilt he could never escape from. And for those who've read his letters, you probably know what that guilt was about. It's about his childhood friend Angelina. To understand Kevin, we need to go back to his past. Kevin grew up somewhere in the western United States, though one of his later letters mentions St. Louis, Missouri. When he was young, he often helped his family clean their barn, even during winter. One day, he accidentally stepped on an ox's tail and got kicked out of the barn, literally. He landed in the snow, hurt and helpless, until a girl around his age found him and helped him home. That girl was Angelina. Angelina was a Native American girl. Some sources say Cherokee, others say Sioux. It's not clear which tribe exactly, but what's certain is that she came from one of the native tribes of that region. Kevin described her as small, cute, and clever, but also a bit wild, and less mannered compared to what society back then expected. The two quickly became best friends. They played together often, and at some point, it's implied that Angelina couldn't go back to her home and had to stay with Kevin's family for a while. At first, Kevin's parents welcomed her, but then, after hearing about a bounty where people could exchange native tribe members for cattle, greed took over. They told Kevin they were taking Angelina back to her tribe. Before leaving, Angelina gave Kevin her lasso, maybe as a keepsake, or a small promise between friends. But Kevin would soon learn the truth. His parents didn't take her home. They sold her. Or, worse, she might have been killed before they even traded her for cattle. When Kevin found out, he was crushed. Maybe it was guilt for believing his parents. Maybe it was regret for not protecting her. But either way, that guilt ate him alive. He left home soon after, wandering as a cowboy, drifting from place to place, trying to outrun his past, but the guilt followed him. He mostly kept to himself, but he would grow bitter, angry, especially whenever someone mentioned the natives. And one day, during a snowstorm, when no one dared to go out to find a missing herd, Kevin volunteered. Maybe it was recklessness, or maybe, deep down, he didn't care what happened anymore. That night, he vanished. Most thought he froze to death. But in truth, he was saved by a native tribe. And in a cruel twist of fate, that tribe turned out to be Angelina's family. They saw the lasso and asked about their daughter. Kevin, terrified and drowning in guilt, lied, saying he had only met her briefly and hadn't seen her since. Later, in his letters, Kevin wrote that he tried to make amends to Angelina's people, but when two worlds clash, different beliefs, different values, some wounds just can't heal. Eventually, he left them too, leaving behind everything he owned, except the lasso, the only thing that tied him to her. After that, he traveled to Europe, maybe hoping to start over, or maybe just running again. But guilt doesn't fade, it only hides. His story picks up again inside the manor. During Game 5, the rules stated that for the game to begin, one of the participants had to drink a strange formula, which everyone thought was poison. One of the players was Patricia Dorval, and Patricia, being eccentric, has a spicy way of talk, and generally a bit rude in manner, naturally became the easy target. The others pushed her to drink it. In Kevin's eyes, however, thing is a bit different. In that scene, he saw Angelina, another soul pushed aside because she didn't fit into their world. All the pain, the anger, the guilt he had buried for years, it surfaced. And maybe, for the first time in his life, he decided not to look away. He took the bottle, he drank it himself. In his second letter, it's implied that he knew exactly what he was doing, that this was his final chance to atone, to face the ghost of his past and make things right, even if it killed him. And honestly, if it had ended there, I think it would have been a beautiful ending. Painful, but beautiful. Kevin's story reminds me of Silent Hill 2 or Finding Paradise. That quiet, tragic acceptance that some people can't undo what they've done, but they can still choose to face it with courage. If Kevin had died there, I think he would have died at peace, finally free from the nightmare that haunted him for so long. But that wasn't the ending he got. He survived, and when he woke up, his memories were shattered. In his mind, Angelina was still alive, waiting for him somewhere, calling him back. He couldn't tell what was real anymore, and honestly, that's worse than death. In my take, Kevin's story is one of the most heartbreaking lore pieces in Identity V, not because of what happened, but because of what could have been. It's a story about guilt, about trying to make things right when it's already far too late. And sometimes, redemption doesn't come through forgiveness, but through the quiet pain of remembering. For me, what Kevin did, choosing to sacrifice himself for Patricia, was an act of pure courage and bittersweet peace. After years of running from his past, he finally stopped. He chose to face it. He faced the nightmares that haunted him, the guilt that chained his heart. And with full awareness of what it meant, he walked into his fate willingly. It wasn't just about protecting Patricia. It was about freeing himself from all the pain he endured. And in that single moment, I believe Kevin found the strength to do what he couldn't do all those years ago. To stand up for someone different, someone he saw as innocent, even if it cost him his life. It's tragic, yes, but also deeply fulfilling. Because for Kevin, that final choice wasn't about death. It was about peace, even if the end didn't go his way. There are still so many lore pieces that feel just as deep, but for now, these are all I want to share. Frankly speaking, Identity V's lore quietly mirrors the real world, maybe a little too closely at times. And maybe that's why these stories hit so hard. Sure, it's a horror game on the surface, but the emotions underneath, love, loss, guilt, and longing, they strike something real inside us. When I have more time, I'd love to explore more of these stories together. Still, if there are any lore pieces that left a mark on you, or if you have your own story to share, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.